What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video on the Fearless Nick YouTube channel, and in today's video I'll be going through my AFL 2023 round 11 tips and predictions, and obviously as well as that, like we always do, I'm going to be going back over my round 10 tips from last week and seeing how I went. If you guys haven't already, make sure to leave a like, share and subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated. I'm on the road now to 500 subs and I'm trying to get there as soon as possible, so if you could please hit the big red subscribe button down below, that'd be very much appreciated. Obviously, you've probably noticed I have moved to a bit of a different setup. I'm trying to see what works and what doesn't work. But anyways, without any further ado, let's get straight on reviewing my round 10 tips from last week. So, looking back on my round 10 tips from last week, I got 5 out of 9 for round 10 last week. Yeah, look, I said, quite an average score. I think it was a bit of a tough round to tip. There were a couple of dumb tips from myself, so I guess I can blame myself for that. But so we'll quickly go back over the games from last week, starting off on the Friday night. It was an absolute blockbuster. It was between Port Adelaide and Melbourne. And Port Adelaide got the job done over the D's by 4 points. But yeah, I did tip the D's to beat the Power on Friday night. And unfortunately, that didn't come off. It was a very close and exciting game. But obviously, the class of Port Adelaide was just far too good on the night for Melbourne. They just got out-hunted in the end, Melbourne. And Port Adelaide were able to get on top of them. And also, how good was Zach Butters and Connor Rosie in this game? They were absolutely sublime. They're moving down now to potentially the strangest game I've seen this year. It was North Melbourne taking on Sydney. Now, I'm sure you all know the ending to this game. There was an interchange infringement that cost North Melbourne the game because it was a free kick and a 50-metre penalty to Sydney, which pretty much gifted them a goal and the win. But nonetheless, Sydney got the job done there over North Melbourne, so yeah, I did get that tip correct, thankfully for the umpires. And now moving down now to Mars Stadium in Ballarat, I tipped the Crows to beat the Bulldogs. That's definitely one of the tips that did let me down this week. Obviously, the Bulldogs were far too good on the day for Adelaide. Adelaide just really didn't show up, to be honest. I really thought they'd show a lot more, the Crows. But nonetheless, the Bulldogs were too good there in Ballarat for the Crows, so got that tip incorrect. And then moving over now to Optus Stadium, I tipped Geelong to beat Freo, and that's another one that really cost me. I think this was probably one of the bigger upsets of the round. I don't think a lot of people were tipping the Dockers to win this, but I still wouldn't be worried if I was a Geelong fan. It is Geelong, so they can bounce back at any time. But yeah, great win there for the Dockers, keeping their season alive. And yeah, I did get that tip incorrect, so that sucks a little bit. And then moving over now to the Gabba, I tipped the Lions to beat the Suns. And yeah, the Lions too good there for the Suns. I think it was mainly due to the last quarter, the margin. The Lions just blew it out in the end, and obviously, yeah, got that tip correct. So yeah, that's a good tip there from myself. And then moving down now to the MCG, of course I was very annoyed at this game. Essendon v Richmond, dream time at the G. It was an absolutely ripping contest, don't get me wrong. The atmosphere looked absolutely sensational. But of course Essendon did get up by 1 point, costing me another tip for this week. Richmond so close, almost the better side for 3/4. But just giving it away again in classic Richmond fashion. Yeah, that's another incorrect tip there from myself. And then moving over to UTAS Stadium, probably the ugliest game I've ever seen. Hawthorn got up by 116 points. West Coast are just a new level of bad, man. I tell you what, that is an absolutely shocking performance from the West Coast Eagles. I can't believe I even considered tipping them last week. Because Hawthorn were clearly the better side on the day, and they just ran rings around a pretty awful West Coast side, if I'm going to be honest. And then moving down now to the MCG, I tipped Collingwood to beat Carlton. No problems there. Collingwood, way too good there for the Blues. That's another good tip from myself there. And then the final game of the round, which was at Giant Stadium. Another really good contest, to be honest. GWS and St Kilda. I tipped St Kilda in this match, and they got up by 12 points, so got that tip correct. Very happy with that one. So yeah, like I said, that brings me to a total of 5 out of 9 for round 10. But nonetheless, those were my round 10 tips. Now let's move on to my round 11 tips. Alrighty, so here we are, ladies and gentlemen, round number 11. Geez, I can't believe it's already round 11, man. This year is absolutely flying. But obviously, the first game of round 11 on the Friday night, we have got Sydney taking on Carlton. Massive, massive game, this one. Obviously, Sydney just looked completely awful against North Melbourne last week. It's fair to say they probably should have lost that match, to be honest. Even though I'm happy they didn't because I got the tip right. But yeah, the Blues as well. They've probably been the most untrustworthy side so far this year. You can't really trust Carlton with your tips this year because it often doesn't pay off. And the Blues, they're in some real strife at the moment because, yeah, their season is hanging by a thread right now. I think they're sitting in 11th. So they really need to get a win ASAP, the Blues. Geez, this is a bit of a 50-50 call, this one. I don't think Sydney should be that heavy favourites. I think it should be a 50-50 because, like I said, you can't really trust Carlton. But then again, Sydney, I'd arguably say Carlton, though, have been playing the better footy of the two, to be honest, even though both teams have been in some horror form, and even though Sydney won last week. Geez, this is a real tough one to tip, to be honest, but I think I'm going to tip Carlton. I think they've just been playing the better footy of the two. I think right now, I think Sydney have just not looked inspired. You know, it depends if they get a few players back or not. I think Carlton are going to get the job done here. I think it's going to be an absolutely thrilling contest. So I'm going to go Carlton in this one to win this one by 2 points in an absolute thriller on Friday night. Moving down now to Marvel Stadium, and I think this is a pretty easy one, although you wouldn't say that considering St Kilda really had to arm wrestle GWS, even though GWS are a pretty hard side to play against sometimes. And Hawthorn just did get a 116-point win, albeit it was over West Coast, so you know, you can't really take that into consideration too much, although Hawthorn did look pretty good, to be honest, in that match. I still think I'm going to tip the Saints in this one. I just think the Saints are just the better side this year. And the Saints, I think they'll get a win here over the Hawks somewhat comfortably. I think the Saints will get the job done here by 27 points. Moving down now to the MCG, and we've got Melbourne taking on Fremantle. Now, if you remember this game last year, Freo caused a massive upset at the MCG when no one thought they would. Albeit the Dockers were in better form last year than they are this year. Although they actually have been playing some good footy as of late, the Dockers. So I definitely wouldn't rule them out of this one. The D's, obviously, last week, yeah, really were just unlucky in the end. Port Adelaide just came out charging at them. You know, they were almost out-hunted at the footy. They were just, you know, constantly under pressure from Port Adelaide, and eventually they just couldn't stand up to it. Port Adelaide, credit to them, they were phenomenal, but I think the D's should bounce back in this one. I know we said it last year and Freo caused a massive upset, and they've currently won 2 games on the trot now, the Dockers, so they are in some good form, but I think the D's will prove too strong here for Freo. The D's, they'll win this one here by 23 points. Moving down now to GMHBA Stadium, we've got Geelong taking on GWS, and I think this is a pretty easy one here. I'm going to be tipping Geelong to win this one. Look, I do rate GWS as a side. They're a pretty hard side to play against sometimes, the Giants, especially last week. You know, St Kilda, they really had to fight to get that win last week over the Giants. But I think just because it's at GMHBA Stadium, I think it's really hard to go past Geelong. You know, obviously last time they played there, they did beat Adelaide, albeit it was an arm wrestle, but they did beat them. And then the time before that, they beat Sydney by 93 points. So I think Geelong, they'll be hungry for a win after the last 2 weeks. And I think they'll come out charging in this one, the Cats. And they'll get a pretty good win here over the Giants by 20 points. Moving down now to TIO Stadium, we've got Gold Coast taking on the Bulldogs. Now, I apologise, Bulldogs fans. I have been not quite backing in your team as of the last couple of weeks. I didn't tip them last week, and it really cost me against Adelaide. And I think the week before that, I think I tipped Carlton to beat the Dogs as well. So, yeah, I really haven't been giving the Dogs enough credit. I think they've been absolutely sensational the last couple of weeks. Whereas Gold Coast, I thought, were pretty good for 3 quarters against Brisbane. But obviously in the last quarter, Brisbane were just far too good. Their experience and class just outshined the Lions. And, yeah, the Suns were ultimately outclassed, especially in that last quarter, like I said. I definitely think Gold Coast are a shot here, but I think the way the Bulldogs are playing, you'd be a bit silly to tip against the Bulldogs here in this one. So, again, not ruling Gold Coast out. I think they could definitely put up a good fight, but I'm going to be tipping the Dogs to win this one here in a bit of an arm wrestle as well. I think it'll be a somewhat close game, but I think the Dogs, they'll get up and win this one by 14 points. Moving down now to Optus Stadium, and, well, look, if it was at Marvel, after what I saw West Coast last week, I don't think they've got any chance to win this one. 6% going with West Coast here in this one. You know, I guess considering they did have a huge loss, West Coast, I think, you know, they might be angry and finally start to fire up and play some good footy. Essendon are a little bit unpredictable, but then again, they did have a very good win last week over Richmond. A very resilient win, to be honest. You know, they looked almost gone after Judson Clark kicked that goal, but somehow just found a way to hang in there and ultimately get the 4 points that they much needed after a few losses in a row. I think I'm going to be tipping Essendon in this one. I think West Coast, because it's at Optus, I do think West Coast are a shot, but I think Essendon, the way they've been playing recently, has been absolutely phenomenal, like I said, and I really just think Essendon should outshine the Eagles in this one, albeit I think West Coast, in fact, I hope West Coast actually put up a fight this time and don't make it a cakewalk for the Bombers in this one. But I'm going to be tipping the Bombers in this one. I think they'll be too good for West Coast here in this one. And I think the Bombers, they'll win this one by 23 points. Moving down now to the MCG, and we've got Richmond taking on Port Adelaide. Now, obviously, Richmond were pretty disappointing, it's fair to say, last week. I think, you know, everyone's still criticising, you know, the fact that we haven't won a close game in a while. I'm very disappointed how the club has been going so far this year. I really thought we'd be doing a lot better than this, but obviously not at the moment. Whereas Port Adelaide, they are in some great form at the moment. I think they've won, 7 in a row now? 8 in a row, something like that. And fair play to Ken Hinkley. Like, there was a lot of pressure on him, you know, at the start of the year. And right now, his team is absolutely flying. I would back Port Adelaide, but I said, you know, after the Geelong game, I wouldn't tip against Richmond again. And, you know, maybe after last week, you know, we could get inspired and, you know, play the footy that we played against Geelong and against Adelaide. But I think it is a slim chance of happening, but because I'm a Richmond fan and I have to stay loyal, I'm going to be tipping the Tigers in this match. Obviously, it'll be by a very close margin. Like I said, I don't want to get too cocky, but look, I don't think Richmond will win, but I obviously have to tip them because I'm a Tigers fan. I think Richmond, I think they'll get up in this one. Let's go 8 points. Moving down now to Marvel Stadium, and we've got Collingwood taking on North Melbourne. And again, I think this is a pretty easy one. I think Collingwood just put North Melbourne away in this game. Like I said, North, they were definitely gallant last week against Sydney. They almost deserved the victory, I thought. You know, if it wasn't for that interchange infringement, they probably would have won the match. But I just think Collingwood, they should be fine in this one. The Pies, there's not really much to it. The Pies are just playing unbelievable footy right now. And North Melbourne, well, they've been playing better as of late, but I still don't think it's enough to match Collingwood. If North Melbourne can bring Collingwood down to their level, it is at Marvel Stadium, so you never know. North could put up a fight, but I think Collingwood should win this match. It'll be a bit of a scrappy game, to be honest, but I think Collingwood will win this one by 29 points. And the final game of the round, we've got a very interesting match this one. We've got Adelaide taking on Brisbane at the Adelaide Oval. As most of you know so far this year, the Adelaide Crows, very, very hard to tip against when they're playing at the Adelaide Oval this year. Obviously, we've seen a few of their results at the Adelaide Oval this year. They absolutely pumped Carlton in Gav around. They beat St Kilda pretty comfortably as well at that ground. Who's to say they can't beat Brisbane here at this ground? Brisbane have got to lose at some point. However, saying that, Brisbane have been in absolutely superb form as well. Like Port Adelaide, I think they've won like 7 or 8 in a row now. So, yeah, they're absolutely flying at the moment, the Lions. There's no doubt about it. But I know I like to tip Adelaide, but can you really tip against Adelaide when it's at the Adelaide Oval? I don't think you can. I know Brisbane probably should win. Like, on paper, I think they should win this match. But I think it's really hard to tip against Adelaide. No, I'm going to tip Brisbane. I was nearly going to tip Adelaide, but I already have gone a couple of upsets this round. Richmond and Carlton. So, I'll play it safe and tip Brisbane. I definitely think Adelaide considering it is at the Adelaide Oval, are a shot to win this match. But I just think Brisbane, their class will outshine. It'll be a very close game, but I think Brisbane get up and win this one. In a very close game, the Lions win this one by 7 points. Those were my round 11 tips. Let's quickly go back over them. I tipped Brisbane to beat Adelaide. I tipped Collingwood to beat North Melbourne. I've tipped Richmond to beat Port Adelaide. Obviously, I'm a Richmond fan, so I have to. I tipped Essendon over West Coast. I tipped the Bulldogs over Gold Coast. I tipped Geelong over GWS. I tipped Melbourne over Freo. I tipped St Kilda over Hawthorn. And probably my upset of the week, Carlton over Sydney. I'm not sure if that's a huge upset, but we're going to go with it. So those were my round 11 tips. But before we go, as always, remember to join my tipping comp. This is it here, Fearless Nick comp. So yeah, shout out to everyone here as always. Marie T still on top of the ladder as it stands. Got a 6 this week and is on 65 correct tips for the season. Darcy T, who is in second, got a 5 this week and is on 64 correct tips. Max, who's in third, got a 7 this week and is on 63 correct tips so far this year. Ben P in fourth, who got a 6 this week and is on 62 correct tips. Tied with Shannon, who also got a 6 and is on 62 correct tips for the year. He's in 5th at the moment, Shannon. We've got Shilos in 6th. He's starting to climb the ranks as well. At the moment, I think he was in 7th last week. I can't quite remember. He's on 61 correct tips for the year, and he got a 6 this week as well. So 6 is a pretty common score this week. It's good to see. Moving down now, we've got Christian in 7th, who got a 4 this week, and he's on 59 correct tips. We've got Cooper L, who again got a 6, and is on 59 correct tips for the year as well, currently in 8th. We've got Claudia in 9th, who got a 5 this week, just like me, and is on 58 correct tips. I got a 5 this week, like I said. I'm currently in 10th still, and I'm on 57 correct tips for the year. We've got Hugo in 11th, who got a 6 this week as well, and is on 57 correct tips. And then we got Rick H in 12th, who got a 5 this week, is on 57 correct tips. And we got Samuel D down the bottom in 13th, who also got a 6 and is on 54 correct tips for the year. If you want to join my tipping comp, link will be down below in the description and will also be in the pinned comment. Also, I'll put the code to join down below if you do want a chance to win a shout out, maybe even a sub. So yeah, click the link down below in the description. And so there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those were my round 11 tips for the 2023 AFL season. Remember to comment down below your tips for this week down below in the comments. I'd really like to know your thoughts on this week. Remember to join my tipping comp if you haven't already. Like I said, link will be down below in the description. If you want a chance to win a shout out and maybe even a sub from myself, then click the link down below in the description and the pinned comment, and also put the code to join down below as well. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in my next video. Cheers!